joining us in the gallery and any who might be viewing online. I'm going to call us back to order at 6:30. The town of Smithers acknowledges the Gidim Den clan and the Wet'suwet'en people on whose unceded traditional territory we live, work, and play. The public is notified the meeting is being recorded and webcast, a notice of which is on the bulletin board outside its chambers. Council, we have an agenda including a supplemental, and if there is no opposition, as we approve the agenda, we can approve the supplemental and vary the agenda to move item 19.1 up to 14.3. And if that's agreeable, I'll get a motion to approve the agenda. But everybody, Councillor Buchan and Councillor Patterson. All in favor? Any opposed? And that's carried. And Councillor Raven, I'll just note it's about the same. There's a little delay, but it's been working well. So once again, I invite you to interrupt if it seems like we're not keeping up. Okay. And first up on the agenda, we do have a delegation, the Bulkley Maurice Forest Landscape Planning Project. And I'm just going to invite those who are with the delegation to please come forward to the table. Feel free to bring extra chairs, however you'd like to do it. And do we have your other member, someone joining us by Zoom? Okay, welcome. I appreciate you coming. And I had the pleasure of seeing some of this previously at the regional district. So I'll just invite you to introduce yourselves and your team that's with you, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thanks for having us here tonight. My name is Tara Dunphy. I'm the Director of Strategic Initiatives and Forest Landscape Planning for the Ministry of Forests. And this is actually a joint presentation between the Ministry of Forests and a couple of the nations that reside in the Bulkley and Maurice or have territory in the Bulkley and Maurice timber supply areas. So.
Hi, my name is Brett Tripp. I'm here with the Office of the Wet'suwet'en Natural Resources Project Coordinator.
Also with us today online is Kevin Stevens. Kevin is the director of the Gitxsan Lac-Gift Management Office and is also co-chair of the Bulkley Maurice Forest Landscape Planning process. Leanne Helkenberg from the Office of the Wet'suwet'en, who's the acting natural resources manager, and Cam Bentley, who's also co-chair of the Bulkley Maurice Forest Landscape Planning process and the district manager of the District of Skeena-Stikine. Are you working the slides? Okay, thank you. So today we'd like to talk to you about what forest landscape planning is and how it came about that we have a forest landscape planning process in the Bulkley and the Maurice timber supply areas. Also what the planning table structure is and how this process relates to other initiatives that are ongoing in this area. We have time set aside at the end if you have any questions. Just a brief overview of forest landscape planning. If you haven't been exposed to it before, forest landscape plans are part of the provincial government's Forest and Range Practice Act improvement program that was recently passed into legislation. And one of the drivers behind the Forest and Range Practices Act amendment, or we call FERPA for short, was to better align FERPA with DRIPA, the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. And so how it does this is that forest landscape plans are replacing forest stewardship plans, which were a site-by-site based approach done by forest licensees. Forest landscape plans are done in partnership with nations and involve local communities. We look for local solutions to local problems. So we'll get into that in a bit. Forest landscape plans only apply to community forests and First Nation woodland licenses that are over 1,200 hectares in size. So we have a couple that will be involved in these processes. And then one of the drivers from moving from forest stewardship plans to forest landscape plans is that forest stewardship plans can cover large geographic areas, but at a site-by-site approach, whereas forest landscape plans are like a comprehensive plan for an area, and we can build on the approaches of the adjacent timber supply areas. We can come up with a plan for natural disturbances such as wildfire or forest health issues like insect infestation, so they can work together Another difference between forest stewardship planning and forest landscape planning is that forest stewardship plans don't necessarily contain a lot of spatial information, where forest landscape plans, part of what we do is we get the maps out with not only our nation partners, but members of the community have the opportunity to input into where the harvesting will occur. If there's ungulate winter range for moose, that kind of thing can be drawn on a map, and it's something that goes through a public process. A third reason is that forest stewardship plans are easily amendable, but forest landscape plans are on a 10-year cycle. So every 10 years, a new one comes up, and we can look for problems or differences or things that we didn't foresee in the last iteration and improve upon that in the next one. Next slide. So here's a few more. There's the short version there. A key difference too in this approach is that like timber isn't the trump value in forest landscape plans. We look at a holistic approach to managing the landscape. So we have values such as moose, water, wildlife, all through the lens of wildfire and climate change. So it's the nations have, or the values have to work together in this plan. It's not just putting the timber at the top. So there's 5 measurable outcomes that a forest landscape plan has to deliver on. One is the production supply of timber, so that's not forgotten. It is an objective, but it's not the only objective. Another is Indigenous interests and values, and this I would say is a different approach from the BC government, that this is included and will be part of the legally established plan. So that we solicit values from our Indigenous partners and find a way to translate that into the plan that will be established by the Chief Forester. Third is the conservation protection of the environment. And this is probably the part you're interested in, is the local community's values. So how do we get that in the plan? Well, one way we do is we have what we call a stakeholder review and input group, and that will be kicking off for these plans shortly. So it's a group that will meet probably quarterly and most likely virtually. Anyone from the community can participate in this, and we would really welcome the review of draft products we would produce, feedback on the process, answer questions, and really listen to the feedback from the community members. Another is the forest health, so that includes preventing, mitigating, and adapting to impacts that are significant disturbances on the forest. That can be, like I said, wildfire, insects, disease, or drought. Do you have anything to add? So there is a key difference between forest landscape planning and land use planning. First of all, land use planning is done out of a different ministry now. So that's the Water, Land and Resource Stewardship Ministry. They do have connections. Land use planning applies to all sectors like mining, agriculture, forestry also, but it goes across all sectors, whereas forest landscape planning can only regulate things that are legislated under the Forest and Range Practices Act. The land use plans can make social choice decisions. So it can say like how we want to manage the area, whether this is for like visual quality or something to that effect. Whereas this is about objectives and practices for forest management areas, but also how like we incorporate the local values into that direction. Land use plans can also have permanent protected areas. Forest landscape plans follow the direction from landscape plans. So we don't set that, that's in the higher level plan. So we take our direction from that higher level plan. And then land use plans are usually over longer terms. They can be 20 or 30 years before they're revisited. Whereas forest landscape plans are on a 10-year cycle. And every 5 years, we have to report out, we're legally required to report out on the effectiveness of this plan. So monitoring is something that is required under forest landscape planning regime.
Yeah, so as Kara mentioned, one of the key measurable or outcomes from this project is to incorporate Indigenous values and knowledge. So recognizing that Indigenous knowledge is often very holistic and qualitative in nature. It involves a lot of storytelling compared to Western science that is based off of procedures and evidence. A really key portion of this project is to ensure that we're incorporating both sides of Indigenous knowledge and Western science to the plan, and meeting regularly to ensure that our outcomes are synchronized together. You can see from this map here on the slides, this kind of gives an overview of the spatial extent of the project. So recognizing that the location of the Bulkley and Maurice TSAs relative to the Skeena Sustainability Assessment Forum project area. So you can see on the map here, the Skeena, the SAF project area in relation with nations territory that are involved in the project. And also just recognizing that the reason why we are combining the Bulkley and Maurice TSAs together in this context is because of the overlap with the SAF project area. And recognizing that SAF nations for both of the Bulkley and the Maurice will be similar.
If you look at this map, like another key reason that the Bulkley and Maurice were picked to go, you know, as the first round of forest landscape plans that weren't pilots is that, first of all, the proximity to the pilot. So in BC, there were four forest landscape planning pilots. One was in the Lakes Timber Supply area, one in Sunshine Coast, one in Quesnel, and one in Tree Farm License 37 on the island. And so with Lakes, our nation partners were comprised of Wet'suwet'en peoples, Lake Babine Nation, Chislata Carrier Nation, and the aggregate of the Carriers Canning First Nations. It's an aggregate of 7. And so when the opportunity came for new forest landscape plans to be initiated across the province, there was 25 million announced provincially associated with the launch of 8 new forest landscape plans. This area got 2, we count them as 1 because they go together. But one of the key reasons for that is that we were ready. So we've worked with the nations on lakes for a couple of years. We've worked through the pilot, kind of got some of the kinks out of the process on what was working and what wasn't working. And collectively, we thought it was a good idea to apply the lessons learned from the pilot and expand it across the Bulkley and Maurice Timber Supply area, the adjacent 2 TSAs. So that crosses some district boundaries. So Cam, the district manager of District Skeena, Stikine, Bulkley falls within his district. We also work with another district manager in Nadina, but we're able to work across the district boundaries to make this work. And another reason why this is a good idea to pair them like we have is that our nation partners don't have to repeat themselves 3 times for 3 specific TSAs when we're going for a landscape level approach. So it's a way we can work across administrative boundaries and try to align with traditional territory boundaries. So there's a few things going on in this area besides the Bulkley and Maurice forest landscape plans. Should have said at the beginning, they started in November 2023. We had our first meeting. And so we've had 2 meetings. We've got another one on this Thursday coming from the main planning table. But the forest landscape plans don't work as standalone products or standalone initiatives. There's a very clear linkage to other work going on locally, and we try the best we can to be efficient with both the products we produce and that we build on other initiatives, the time we do, and try to work really synergistically across those initiatives, whether it's Ministry of Forests or it's the Ministry of Water, Land and Resource Stewardship. So a few integration points here. The forest landscape plan and the timber supply review for these 2 timber supply areas have a direct connection So both of these TSAs, Bulkley and Maurice, are due for a timber supply review. We have paired that now with the forest landscape planning process, and we can produce products that are gonna work together. The second is the forest landscape plan monitoring, which is a requirement of this process. This works really synergistically with other things going on locally. One is cumulative effects. So there's a local, like Skeena region cumulative effects program that works to build decision support tools to help us inform like how we're doing against cumulative effects thresholds. And so this work can directly inform that work. So these teams are working together, so we don't have to come up with independent databases. It's all works together. So this is at least the vision, right, that we have locally, is to try to make all these things speak to each other. We don't have this quite ironed out yet. We're still finalizing our terms of reference, but this should give you a rough idea of what the planning table structure looks like for the Bulkley Maurice and where our community fits in. And so at the main planning table, there's Ministry of Forest reps, there's our nation partners, we have licensees and the community forest reps there. Then we have a structure that we have an independent group, the First Nation Steering Committee, and Brett is a member of this. We have this on our pilot, and it looks like we're going to set it up for this project too.
Yeah, so the intent of the First Nations Steering Committee is essentially just an opportunity for nations to come together and collectively ensure that we're on the same page and bringing the same vision forward. Really kind of use as a collective voice within the project. It worked really well in the Lakes project, just as a way to kind of make sure that we're all on the same page moving forward. So it sounds like we're probably going to do something similar in this project as well. And yeah, it's just an opportunity for nations to have another platform to make sure that we're kind of moving in the same direction.
So this is a bit of a unique setup, particularly for the Ministry of Forest, because before the product goes to the statutory decision maker for approval, we're trying a new structure, which is that we have these check-in points with our government to government partner leadership tables. So every time we hit a milestone, which we've outlined together on what the key decision points would be, we have a check-in with our nation partners on like, is this the direction that we've agreed to go together? And then at the end of the process, it goes to the chief forester for establishment of the plan. On the left is the stakeholder review and input group, and that's the group I referenced earlier in the presentation. And so that would be where, you know, interest groups in the community, like the Community Resource Board, the Rod and Gun Club, Snowmobile Club, like etc., could come and voice concerns, give feedback, give input, review products, ask questions. So we've sent letters to many of the interest groups locally now, almost all of them, and we would expect to kick that off probably late March or early April. So to the right is a public input box, and that's a little bit different than the stakeholder review and input box. And the reason why is that the stakeholder review and input group is meant to be for locals. The public is basically a website platform where anyone in BC can review product deliverables that are put up there for review. So that's just as they're done, we'll put the drafts up on the website and open it up for public comment. And finally, we have technical working groups at the bottom. So this is mostly referencing the values I mentioned earlier. You have it for timber, you have it for water, wildlife, soils, range, fire, you name it, right? We'll go through that exercise together shortly. Those are examples from the pilot. We know that managing multiple values is going to take compromise and it's going to be a trade-off discussion. So we get these technical working groups going to come up with a strategy for each value. And then they follow a specific format: value, objective, indicator, and target. that would be what kind of what the body of the plan looks like. But we know they won't all work synergistically, so we get the groups all going together, get them to come present what they have and see which ones are clashing. We try to find an approach that will kind of work in harmony. I think I touched on this one, you could probably move ahead, thanks. So this is a 6-month timeline for the Bulkley Marie's Forest Landscape Plan. I would say it's going much faster than the pilot just because we've been able to leverage much of the information and process we've developed as part of the pilot. And so where we are is, like I said, we started in November, we drafted a project charter, which we jointly approved from Nations and BC side, and then launched the planning table. We're developing our terms of reference, which we expect to finalize shortly. And then we'll start our vision, mission, goals document, start our timber supply review kickoff, and start establishing our technical working groups for the values that we basically solicit. All along the way, we have these check-in points with our nation partners. That's a rough overview. Happy to have any kind of discussion or go back and talk about other points if you have more, or answer any questions. And also I would ask Kevin if you have anything to add, and also Cam or Leanne, if we missed anything you want to touch
Not seeing anything from the 3 people specifically invited, so if it's okay, I'll just open the table to council and to the folks that were just invited to speak. If there is something, we can make this work. So for folks, for Cam and Leanne and Kevin, we'll figure out if you want to join the conversation. So first to the council table, if there are any questions or comments for the delegation. Councilor Buchanan.
Thanks for your presentation. The one question I have, when forest landscape planning is done, is there input solicited from companies that engage in forestry operations?
the avenue for forestry operations or forestry companies that were maybe indirectly related to the forestry sector, like they were major licensees, would be via the stakeholder review and input group. Forest landscape plans don't apply to woodlots, if that's what you're thinking. So they would just, it would be status quo for them. There's this, like a size cutoff. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I was just curious, like when I think of our community and how important PIR is to our community, I'd love to know that they have a significant voice in decisions that are being made. I guess that's kind of what I was curious about.
PIR are at the table, and at the Lakes project, the chief forester of West Fraser is one of the co-chairs.
Thank you.
Maybe for clarity to help with that, I think you said something near the beginning about what is contained within the forest landscape plan. You made some reference to a size of land plot. And that might help, because I think you referenced licensees at the time.
So it's we would say like major licensees, then community forests that are over 1,200 hectares in size, and First Nation woodland license over 1,200 hectares.
So to give us a sense of the licensees that were involved in the bulk, the area that would be, so PIR is a major licensee. So that would include Whitset is a major licensee holder. Some people know it as Canfor or Lowell Johnson previously, but it's Whitset. And then Lake Babine Nation themselves has license within the bulk. Then there's Canfor and Maurice would be the large players, and also PIR also holds a license in Maurice. Thank you. Yeah.
Councilor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Any opportunity to pick these brilliant minds, I'm here for it. So thank you so much for the presentation. Very impressive planning table structure, not only your approach to government leadership, but the inclusiveness with community input opportunities, I think is incredible. So apologize in advance if this question is too prescriptive, recognizing that you're just launching into your planning process. So my question is, do you foresee the FLP process supporting implementation of Clean BC's roadmap, so to 2030? So for example, they talk about the shift from high value or high volume, to high value production. And so just wondering if your planning process will help to influence potential opportunities for our community. So as an example, I think about how Skeena sawmills and Terrace minimize their slash pile burning, which we know is an important issue to this community through their pellet production. So I was just curious if that question one makes sense, and two, if it's too early in the process to even foresee what outcomes could be. But I was just interested in the slide where you say the production and supply of timber. Thanks.
So I think the expert is sitting beside me on the roadmap. But I perceive that this process is going to take us down a path with that membership, like if we go back 1 slide, 2 slides, 3 slides, there we go. So that planning table group where we've got Indigenous members and licensee branch. So that's sort of the core nucleus of what's driving the production where we're going. I would say that's a cross section of, the interests that we've outlined, which includes economic. And so there's going to be that, as Tara alluded to, the trade-offs of us trying to understand where do we want to go within that constrained box. So, I think this will result in different activities. The forest landscape activities, the forest activities will be governed by this plan, and it will be different than the past. I would say that the co-chairs, the groups, we don't know where that's going yet because we haven't started on that process. I wouldn't rule out something like that, but it's not hardwired. I would suggest it's going to be appropriate. Expert.
I really wanted to hear from Terry. No, I'm just kidding.
It's a relevant question. So how I think that might unfold is that, so we talked about values, right? Timber is value. So when we solicit input from like community, the licensees, nation partners, and whatever BC's mandate is, right? An example of how that could play out is that the plan will probably be in the format of a value, objective, indicator, and target, right? So if the value is timber, if the objective is to move from or to high volume to high value, then the indicator is like, how do we measure that? What's our target? So that would be exactly how that could play out in the plan.
Thank you. And the reason why I ask is I'm sure you're very familiar being the Ministry of Forests. And obviously everyone in our community knows that forestry is near and dear to our hearts. But at this table in particular, we continue to hear about all the mill curtailments and closures. So I just was interested. I assume that your planning table would be thinking about those types of options. So yeah, thank you very much.
Councilor Rick.
Yeah, sorry, just in response to the question about stakeholders, you mentioned a lot of large stakeholders. What kind of input opportunities are for smaller stakeholders, like logging companies and logging contractors that are going to be affected by these decisions? Are they also being invited to stakeholder review, or are they going to be limited to public input?
The stakeholder review and input group is for anyone local to the forest landscape planning geographic area. So they're welcome to attend those groups, those virtual sessions. And they can also review things on the website if they like, but that would probably be the primary source of input.
So I would also suggest though that, we're in another paradigm shift in the forest industry, and I would say that, although you allude to mill closures, there's also, our First Nation partners have an interest in the forest industry, and they, as I cited, are licensees, are major licensees, and that continues to grow and evolve. And so, all of those parties see the benefits of having the spectrum of the community, taken care of. So there is cultural interest, social interest, but economic interest includes those groups. And so, I think it's maybe missed in this transition that there is that lens being brought by, the planning table because of the, both the majors, but the nations also. And, we are here to represent voters.
Go ahead, Councilor.
And then just if you can talk about how the public input works, I don't know if it only looks like there's stuff going out to the public input and there's nothing coming back to the planning table. On the dotted line there, and I was just wondering, in your experience, is the public input coming from locals, or is there are interest groups able to kind of hijack that? I think, and by interest groups, it could be anything. It could be like maybe a snowmobile club really gets involved and really floods the public input and kind of skews that. I'm thinking of all sorts of NGOs with all sorts of different interests. And I was just wondering if that had been the experience before in the other pilot, or if it's working more as intended to just be for the public.
I would say that in the lakes, so we have Lakes to Provide as our best example to date. It's been extremely constructive group. So this is a technical plan. It's, the first product that was reviewed by the Lake Stakeholder Review and Input Group was a 142-page technical current condition report. We received 13 pages of feedback. We went through every line with the Stakeholder Review and Input Group. And first we provided feedback and said where we could and where we couldn't use it. Some of it was out of scope, but we could redirect that to another initiative or platform. For the public input on the website, we do produce a what we heard report and say like how we use the feedback that was provided, and same thing. Some of it is, it's not always in scope. I'd say that's the biggest thing. So people are welcome to provide input. That's not an issue, but it has to be relevant to the objective of the project. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Thanks, Councilor Ray. I've got Councilor Elliott and then Councilor David.
Thank you for the presentation. Appreciate you guys coming out and giving us some education on the project. I just had a question about probably along the lines of with what Councilor Ray was talking about, the public input side. I know for our community, we enjoy local solutions to local problems. How much would that be weighted in the decision-making process, like public input from not this area? I wonder if you could maybe answer that. How that plays into the process. I got a couple more questions after that, but I'll just let you answer.
So your question, sorry. Your question was how is it weighted against local feedback?
Exactly, yeah.
So ultimately, the Stakeholder Review and Input Group and the public input both provide feedback. However, the planning table acts as a technical decision maker. So it's not Cam and I, it's the group. We vote, and so we review that as a collective, and then we look and see what's relevant to the plan, and then we try to keep an open mind, right, about what is being presented and how it can constructively be included in what we're trying to do. So it's not like there's one of us making that decision. We look at it across multiple lenses, I would say. And if you want to add it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would echo what Tara was saying in the sense that when things are brought to the planning table, it's a collective group that discusses it and decides how to move forward, or if to move forward, or how that might look depending on the nature of the questions or the information that's brought to us.
The composition of that group is very local, I would say.
That's good to hear, thanks. One other question, I know with the old growth deferrals, it's been a topic of contention, probably within First Nations groups, maybe not all in agreement. How would that play into this plan or this plan going forward? Are all of the houses in each Indigenous group on board with this way of doing it, or is there, maybe you can't tell me that? I'm just curious as to, you know, are all Indigenous groups in this area on board with the way this is being done?
So, I mean, obviously we have representation from, you know, the nations here co-presenting with us. And we've built sort of the terms of reference, and the charter has all been collaboratively constructed. So, you know, there is, yeah, we're looking for collaboration on that. I think you're asking a question around forest management and sort of outcomes like, you know, old growth and old growth choices. So at this point, the plan as we go through its phases, we will, you know, the elements of what are all components of protection or conservation or not will come up, and we're not there yet. There had been some discussion early in the process around old growth, but at this point, we haven't had any. I think you're asking is there any strife on that side? So right now, no, we're moving forward. We haven't had that. We haven't anointed any areas. But there's, you know, again, part of this process is not starting with a preconceived idea, and it may or may not turn out. We don't know yet. Did I miss that, Brent? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you for that, very much appreciated.
You good? Okay, and Councillor Beekman.
Just one quick question. I think one of you mentioned that the stakeholder meetings are held virtually. How would they be advertised so that a local stakeholder would actually know that a virtual meeting is happening?
So one way we've done this, they don't have to be virtual, like we could have a town hall. Again, right now, what we're working off is the pilot. So for the pilot started during COVID, all virtual meetings. But we can have a town hall to see what the level of interest is, and that's certainly not off the table. In the pilot, we have Councillor Charlie Rensby, who's the chair of the stakeholder review and input group there. So if he receives feedback from any of his constituency he represents, he brings that forward on their behalf. Just because it's quite like the one thing I think that is probably important to convey with the stakeholder review and input group is these projects take years. And so to follow them from inception to finalization is like, it's gonna be a few years of attending a quarterly meeting. And it may not mean much to someone if they're coming in one meeting a year. You probably need some kind of consistent attendance. That's something to keep in mind, why that it might be a good approach to kind of model how Councillor Rensby did it in Lakes, to have something like that where someone who doesn't want to attend all the time can come to their chair and bring forward a problem and they can have it voiced on their behalf.
Thank you.
Okay, I just have a couple, just for clarity, since I did get to hear some of this a couple weeks ago or whenever that was. And you've said a couple of times, you've referenced the pilot, but the pilot is the lakes. And I think you said before, this one's not a pilot. I understand that. So this is actually a planning forum, and you're using the background of the pilot to help shape how you go forward. But this one's not in those pilots.
So in the Lakes Resiliency Project, which is the forest landscape planning pilot in our area, was kicked off, the enabling legislation had not passed, which is Bill 23. And that's why it was a pilot. So we test drove some of the legislation and then we adjusted it before the bill was enacted. That's why these are the first real ones.
Whatever is not a pilot, that's okay, thank you. And you made reference to the timber supply review for our area. When is that due?
For the Maurice, it is due in 25, and for the Bulkley, it is due in 26, tail end of both those. So we've looked to, as part of this process, we are sort of harmonizing them. And again, part of this paradigm shift that the ministry is going through is, again, bringing our nation partners so that we are collaborating on that as opposed to, you know, engaging on that. So this vehicle is an excellent mechanism to do that. So we're moving more in lockstep. It may cause some delays than have historically been occurred in the TSR process.
thank you. And then I think this has been part of the questions that other counselors have asked, but it does reference the community values, and I'm not gonna begin to suggest that people who are involved in the current planning process would be aware of community values, but it is one of those sticky points where people like to feel like whatever they think are the important community values are represented. So what I'm wondering is if you have a way to backstop that, so that you think when you're through that gathering of community values and feel that that would be like highly defendable, because that's where plans sometimes fall apart. People feel like they weren't consulted or they weren't involved in whether it's public or stakeholder or something. So I'm just wondering about that part, because now you've gone through pilots elsewhere. Has that landed well? So that the community, however you define it, feels like the values made it through the process.
That's a good question. I think, so again, I'm gonna reference the pilot a lot because we really cut our teeth on the pilot in a big way. In the pilot, we did have one, I guess, town hall, could call it, where we talked about interests of the community. I think the one thing to note about the forest landscape plan is it isn't a panacea, like it is not gonna solve everything, so we're gonna have to high rate the top things that come to the surface, that bubble up, and focus on those. And usually, I would say, what we've noticed across the province with the pilots is those are things like risk of wildfire, risk of drought, the economy, right? Those are kind of the pillars of the community. And that's in another thing we didn't talk about today, but there is a process for kind of an economic assessment of if there's gonna be an economic impact associated with the plans. And so there is kind of like, it's not a cap, but there's a point where if there's gonna be an impact to the allowable annual cut, that if it's over 10% of the midterm timber supply, then we need a cabinet mandate as a group before we could have that established by the chief forester. So I don't think it won't be an exhaustive list of every value everybody raises, but there will be, I think, where they can be legislated under the Forest and Range Practices Act or enacted under that act. That's maybe the most applicable values for inclusion.
I would just say, I think it's a great question, and how has this landed today? Of the 4 pilots, the furthest, the longest one on the island, and it hasn't finished yet. So the other 3 are sort of in mid-throw still, and I don't think we have a lot of benchmarks to understand the landing concept in all its fullness. So we are still building the runways between ponds.
Well, thank you. I don't have a final comment, but I want to make sure Councilor Wall had opportunity. So thanks for making the time. It's a little different than the normal delegations that we get here that tend to be more kind of contained within our borders, but we're definitely affected, of course, by what happens outside the boundaries of the town of Smithers. And I think over time, what happens on the land is of interest to people. And we have seen planning processes in the past, and nobody ever loves anything 100%. But I think what you're embarking upon, what have embarked upon, provides opportunity and challenge, as they always do. And someone wise in my life said that hard things that we embark on are neither good nor bad, they're just hard. And I think what you're embarking upon is just hard. And so I would invite you, if there is a time where you think, you know what, I think they ought to know what's going on, feel free to reach out. Because that bit about whether it's stakeholder or public input, at this table, we'll get busy in our own little circle again, and there may be times where you'll be thinking, well, where are they? They were interested in a little prompt that hurts us, because our community cares about all of these, be it the economic values, the social values, look to the future, how are we going to, get by a myriad of things as we go forward. So thank you for taking the time. Definitely appreciate it. Thank you for the hard work that you're taking on, and hopefully we'll connect again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and you are welcome to spend the evening with us if you want to. Or you can have your evening back. Okay, council. Back to the agenda. So we are at our public comment period. So if there's someone who would like to speak to an item on our agenda this evening, I'd invite you to the delegation table. You know the drill, but if you could identify the item and introduce yourself for the record.
Abel Overman Smithers, and I'm speaking in regard to item number 14A. I've been down this road before, about 5 years ago, when the town was looking at buying a new tractor for the airport. I recommended to them that they think seriously about getting an electric. And in fact, I got some figures from Select Track out of Northern California. And the prices were comparable for a diesel tractor or a new electric tractor, which we could have charged with solar panels from the airport storage building. Today on 14.8, you're looking at the option of buying 2 more gas or diesel tractors. And I can certainly understand the fascination with having nice new equipment, but at the same time, when I look at the price, roughly $400,000 for 2 tractors, that's a pretty steep price. The disadvantage, of course, with gas and diesel is that it locks us in for the next 5 or 10 years. It does not reduce the bite to the taxpayer because it really is no fuel savings at all. And it doesn't do anything for reducing our emissions, which I think is really important as well. I went and had a look at Select Track's site today and went through it very, very carefully. One of the best tractors that they have is called the E25 hydrostatic. And it's got a current price on it of $31,499 US. So even adding a front end loader on it and maybe getting a spare battery for that same tractor and the US exchange and freight to ship it up here, I think we're talking well under $100,000 for a tractor, which means that essentially for $400,000, we could end up with 4 tractors from Select Track. And I would certainly like to encourage the town to get a hold of Select Track. You'll find that they will be prompt in their response to you. They build a fine product. They are selling like hotcakes. And I think it's time for us to jump into the future. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Ingo. Thanks, Ingo. If there is anyone else in the gallery wanting to speak to something on the agenda, this is your moment. Okay. Thanks, so we're gonna move on. We have no public hearings tonight. And we are at the minutes, 8-1, the regular minutes from January 9th. Motion to approve, please. Councilor Beekman, Councilor Leonard. Any errors or omissions? All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Under section 9, I'm just going to look to Mr. Schroeder if you're able to get us through items to release.
Certainly, and thank you, Your Worship.
Included in this section is a report. This identifies that a motion was released from the January 9th regular meeting of council. This speaking to a proposed childcare facility on Regent Park lands. Secondly, at tonight's closed meeting, council released a motion that council appoint Glenys Snowdiamond to the Accessibility Advisory Committee for a 3-year term expiring January 22nd, 2027.
Thanks, Mr. Schroeder. Okay, we are up to item 10. I don't see anything there. And council reports. So first up, Councilor Beekman.
Nothing to report, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. You can see the agenda of the attached report from Director Wright in the library. There's an infographic attached as well with year review numbers. 32,000 visitors to the library in 2023. So some big numbers, 104,000 items were checked out. Just lots of numbers, 438 new members is very exciting for the library. So just the library's had a couple of rough years through COVID, but seems to be coming back and having a resurgence. So we're very proud of our library and I appreciate what they're doing there. And all thanks to Wendy and her. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Elliott. Any questions for Councillor Elliott? I'm just gonna echo what you said, and I think the numbers speak for themselves. And it's a great job that's being done over there, so please extend my thanks as well. Councillor Leonard.
We had a NCLGA meeting a couple of weeks ago, or maybe last week. Things are on track. Planning is going as scheduled. Last week I was at the BC Natural Resource Forum with the mayor and Ms. Borman, our economic development officer, who was here tonight. It was good and well attended. I was happy to learn a bit more about the natural resource industry. And earlier today, I attended the Museum Society monthly meeting, but had to leave early because we had closed at 5. That's it for me.
Thanks, Councillor Leonard. Any questions for Councillor Leonard? Okay, Councillor Patterson.
And just to confirm your worship, so this is 11.4.1. Is this my notice of intent? Okay, perfect. So just really quickly, I won't get into great detail, but just to say that I tried to provide as much information for council as I possibly could to support your analysis and consideration anticipation of February 13th. I will just say there wasn't a lot of information, i.e. meaning examples that I can pull from, but I did try my best to provide you with some examples that I could find from as far as the other side of the country to Toronto as an example to something more locally like Kitimat. And really truly the goal here is to be just inclusive and hopeful that it will encourage future generations of elected officials to not feel hindered in running for council, as we can appreciate that there's a significant commitment. And then just to be totally transparent, I'm actually expected to have a baby in the spring, so I do obviously have the best interest in this as well, but tried to write it in a way that I was neutral in writing these recommendations. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Councillor Patterson. So first off, congratulations. And with that, if there are any questions on the policy, so the recommendation from Councillor Patterson is just to seek more information from staff. If there's any comments or questions, now's the time. Councillor Wright.
Sorry, is this a note? Is this an actual motion or is this a notice of motion?
Notice.
Thanks, Councillor Wright. You're right. Okay, we're good. We'll just carry on. Yes, Mr. Schroeder? Yes. Okay, thanks for the catch. Prepare your questions for next time, or if you have questions that might help the discussion, you can always forward up to staff as well. Okay, and Councillor Patterson, anything else? Okay, Councillor Raven.
All right, good evening. I would just like to acknowledge that I am zooming in tonight from the traditional territory of the Staylis. I am in Qualts, which means boiling water, also known as Harrison Hot Springs. So not that much to report. On January 10th, I attended an LGCMC, so that's the Local Government Contract Management Committee through UBCM, talking about police contracts and all of that good stuff. There should be some updates coming up through Compass. Also on the 10th, I attended the Babine Lake Mammoth and BC Megafauna presentation at the Old Church with researcher Laura, and I forget her last name, I apologize, which was put on by the Bulkley Valley Museum. And then I had an Access Smithers meeting on the 18th. And we just wanted to, or they wanted to ask me to pass along to the public that they're going to be doing a reevaluation of their group in March. So now that the town has an accessibility committee and the province has been implementing so many different or so much more legislation on accessibility, they're just going to kind of reevaluate their priorities and see where their place is now that there seems to be some other formal avenues for accessibility. So it's not necessarily going anywhere, they just might change their format of it.
Thanks, Councilor Raven. Any questions through Councilor Raven? Okay, thank you. And just so you know, we're hearing you loud and clear, so that's working. Okay, Councilor Ray.
Sorry, nothing to report.
All right, my report is there. First up is the Standing Committee on Strategic Priorities list. That is for information. If there's any comments or questions. Them. And otherwise, my report is there. And the only thing I'll add, and it was Councillor Patterson and I met today with representatives of Smithers Social Planning Council. And in all likelihood, we will hear from the Social Planning Council again, just in terms of whether or not council would like to reconsider participation or being attached to social planning. But that was the kind of the invitation of the meeting. And Councillor Patterson, as you know, is attached to the health portfolio. So there we go. And otherwise, if there's questions, I'll take them on my report. Okay. And we will just move on to the staff report. So first up, 14.1. And I have got to say, that was the first one. I'm not up to the new president. I don't have a 14.1. It's a delegation. Fine. I'm not up to the change of the process yet. So because I'm stumbling, we have people in the gallery. 14.1 is actually just to receive the information that we heard already from the delegation, so we can't unhear it. We've heard it already, so we'll move on. And 14.2, then we have the signing authorities report from Ms. Lee, recommending that we approve the signing authorities, reflecting our change in staff. Councillor Fugma.
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Leonard. Any discussion, Councillor Ray?
Just a quick question, probably through to Ms. Lee. Does that mean we all have to sign again?
Yes, through the mayor, yes, unfortunately. And thanks for asking, because I know everyone just signed and they're gonna feel they don't have to do it again, but you really have to do it again. So when Ms. Lee sends you the note saying come in and sign, please do. Thanks for the clarity. All in favor? Any opposed? And that's carried unanimously. Okay, and 14.3 is the item that we brought forward. So it was near supplemental 19.1, and it's just the decision on whether or not we want to rejoin the BC Rural Health Network. Oh, and I didn't see the cost. It is right there in front of me now. So the annual membership fee is $50. What's your pleasure? Councillor Patterson.
I just had a question, your worship, through to maybe staff or yourself that just have more experience on do you see value in what we get for that fee? I'm not familiar with that. I guess the return on investment, so to speak.
Quite frankly, I haven't been directly involved since the investment's $50. I don't feel that threatened by that. When I see the outputs of the past year, I mean, they're fairly low outputs, but I think it is an entity that's more concerned with rural health. And I think for the $50 membership fee, it's probably worth being involved in something that's floating the myriad of issues that rural health faces, versus, you know, the number of people that will just give weight to urban health issues. Councillor Ray.
So if I remember correctly, because it's the first renewal, staff asks us, and then if we choose to renew, staff just automatically renews afterwards. So my question actually would be, at what threshold would we be asked again if the price went up?
My guess is we could set the threshold. I don't know that staff, I mean, if we left it to staff to renew, then they would, and if we want to see it again, if it's $100 or $200 or $500, I think we would just make that by motion. Mr. Schroeder.
Thank you, your worship. Perhaps just to make it easy, if there was a price increase, staff would bring that back for council's consideration.
that what Councillor?
Yeah, that's, I just sometimes these things get away on us. Now it's 50, who knows, but it'll be in 5 years.
Okay, and Mr. Schroeder, for clarity, does that have to be reflected in the motion or is that a practice?
That could be considered a practice, your worship.
Okay, Councillor Patterson moves that we renew our membership. Is there a second? Councillor Elliott, any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? And that's carried unanimously. Thanks, folks. 13.4, we have a report from Ms. LeBlanc. And regarding Smithers Splash Pad Society, asking us, or the staff recommendation is that we direct staff to meet with representatives of the Splash Pad Society. Councilor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. My thoughts around this initially were just the relation to the Parks and Recreation Master Planning process, so I was happy to see it noted here, and I think I'm happy to support that we meet with them to have a conversation if it's inclusive of an ongoing process already. But just caution that I obviously, and maybe I'm just being redundant here, that we wouldn't commit to anything until we have further discussions through our strategic planning process. But yeah, that's it for me. Thanks.
Thanks, Councilor Patterson. Mr. George.
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Patterson. So they have been involved in the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, and coming forward to council at an upcoming committee of the whole will be some concept designs, which included feedback from the splash pad for what they're looking for in some of our city parks. So look forward to sharing that engagement and their vision with council in the upcoming months.
Any thoughts, anyone? Councilor.
Well, I'm just a little. This is the right process, but it's interesting that a group can be involved in the master planning without seeing if it's a priority of council at all. It's kind of, I get it, and I totally, I think it's right, but I'm a little concerned about the splash pad. It's not a very long season for splash padding up here. I've heard anecdotally that there are, and we would have to get reports back from staff and stuff, but there are serious liability issues. You're running children and perhaps adults on wet concrete. And I think there's far more likelihood of injury. You don't put on helmets, you don't put on knee pads, elbow pads. When you go on a splash pad, you have a swimming trunks or swimsuit on. And so I have a huge concern about that. It's a lot of infrastructure to put in for water and then maintain. It's also, I'm not really too sure, because you want, and it's going to get the most use when it's hot and dry outside, which is when we want to be conserving water. And some of the other things that we've talked about having partnerships about, but like the skate park, we know how long it gets used. It's a fairly long season. This is a short season. I remember going with my kids to the lake in the middle of August, a couple of weeks till school, and being the only people there because it was too cold for everybody. So I'm just concerned about I don't like where it is in the plan, and we'll be able to discuss that later. But I just don't know if it's something that we should be involved in. I see the costs the benefits are going to outweigh the costs, are not going to outweigh the costs. And I don't want to shoot any idea down right away, but I'm not really too keen on this idea.
Thanks, Councilor Ray. Councilor Dugan.
Thank you, Mayor Ethel. I have mixed feelings on this one. I'm comfortable with the conversation happening. I share Councilor Ray's concerns about liability issues. And I'm going to bring up the thing we bring up over and over again. capacity, staff capacity, because this is gonna be one more thing that town staff has to maintain, and I think it would be fairly labor intensive, especially before winter happens and something like this would have to be winterized, so that would be why I have mixed feelings about it.
Thanks, Councillor Buchanan, Councillor Elliott.
I love water parks, but I don't think I'm for this. For all the reasons that have already been stated, I think we've been in drought. We need water. We don't have water. We shouldn't be using water for this, in my opinion. I can't water my tomatoes. I don't feel like my kids should be playing in the water park. My kids have enjoyed water parks in the Okanagan. But we have a really short season. I think we can meet, but I don't think I could support it. Be a lot of money down the road, I think, to maintain it.
Thanks, Councillor Elliott. Councillor Raven.
So I'm not going to say whether I'm for or against because I don't know. I really want to see what gets brought up. I mean, everyone has concerns, everyone has thoughts, but till I hear a staff report or hear from this group, I just want to keep an open mind. So I'm looking forward to hearing that, hearing what our community has to say, because you never know, it might be something fantastic.
Thanks, Councillor Raven. I think I have some questions as well, and it mainly relates to timing. So, you know, and this is just a recommendation that staff meet with members of the society. I'm not opposed to that. I do have a question on timing, and Mr. George has sort of touched on that. I'm aware that before the rec and park plan started, that there were other community groups with other ideas of things that they wanted, particularly racket sports. And so we have limited park land on which things can go. So that will be, I'm assuming, part of the concept plan that you're talking about. We do have the community partnership agreement. We have talked about, perhaps just at the idea stage, is the notion of maintenance, you know, and I used the example of the Cycle 16 trail for part of the deal with the regional district is that the Cycle 16 Society plus users, including the municipality, came up with some agreement on supporting the maintenance cost. So Cycle 16 also provides some of the ongoing maintenance that was a part of the deal. So there might be more than one way to address this. If you know, a society really wants something, is there a way to add to the community partnership agreement some sort of maintenance contribution? Probably. I'm really interested in seeing what the recommendations are for use of parkland, be it splash park, racket sports, or anything else that the community wants, because it is a really limited resource, that parkland. I'm also concerned about water, all those sorts of things. So I think with all of those concerns out front, you know, and I will say, you know, I have spoken to members of, or like a couple of members of the Splash Park Society in the past and said, you know, another option, because it's a fairly small footprint. One other option is simply to acquire private land and build a private splash park. That's another way to get one. So that could be out there as well. I did a little bit of searching on the cost of splash parks. I don't know what's being proposed, but I'm seeing like $125 to $250 million to build. But I haven't got any information on maintenance. So it's not gigantic in, you know, compared to some of our other recreation facilities, but it's also not nothing. So you kind of have to figure it out. So in terms of following through in the recommendation, I'm okay with the concerns I put on the table. So back to folks, if anyone wants to move the recommendation, we can go from there. I saw Councillor Patterson and then Councillor Raymond. Or are you moving?
I'll wait if there's, yeah.
Okay, were you moving or did you have a question? Councillor.
It's actually a question and also a concern is how much work do we let a group do before we make a yes or no decision? Like, do we, my concern is, especially because I'm leaning towards not supporting it. But again, keeping an open mind, but because I'm leaning against supporting it, I don't want a group to do a bunch of work and spend a bunch of money and then cut them off. So I'm just wondering through the staff, like, what are we expecting the initial discussions to be like?
I'll go to staff. The one thing I'll say though is that my knowledge of Smithereens is we can tell them that we're leaning against and a big group of the residents want something, they're gonna keep working on it. So I mean, that's the plus and the minus of the enthusiasm of volunteer groups. So I just think it's okay to be cautious and at the same time, if people really want to be part of something, they're gonna keep going. Mr. Schroeder.
Thank you, your worship. To the specific question is, when would council have an opportunity to, put the potential brakes on a project? That would be at step one of the community partnership policy on page 52 of the agenda for anyone looking for that. When a project concept is provided to mayor and council, that would be the initial first step. At that phase, is just a high level summary of the project and what it would be intended to do.
Thanks, Mr. Schroeder. Councilor Leonard.
I've struggled a bit with this because I came in here just not really leaning one way or the other, just not maybe wanting more information from this group. Because I don't know what it entails, but listening to you all, maybe, I would support the recommendation that staff meet with them. While staff could also convey that there are other ways than just providing public lands to get this done for them. And that they could pursue maybe going a private route too. So.
Thanks, Councilor Leonard. So I'm not sensing any real reason why we would not permit staff to have the conversation, so. Councilor Beaman.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I expressed some reservations, but I'm still totally comfortable moving the recommendation because I have no problems at all with conversations happening. So I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you, seconder. Councilor Patterson, was that your hand up? Moved by Councilor Beaman, second by Councilor Patterson. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? And that's carried unanimously. Okay. Item 14.5. A report from Ms. Berriman on the NDIT grant writing program with the recommendation that we apply for the money. Councilor Patterson moves. Is there a seconder? Councilor Leonard seconds. Councilor Ray.
Just a question, just to make sure that this would start in July of 2024, so the current grant writer still has almost 6 months in there. Just wanted to make sure, just a comment that this is being done a little differently than it was before. The numbers of grants applied for and money was quite a bit higher when we were running this before, but grant writing workshops and help to staff wasn't happening. So it's comparing apples to oranges, but knowing it's only 6 months through at this point also makes a difference.
Thanks. Was there anything Mr. George wanted to add?
Thank you, Worship. Through to Councillor Ray. I was just going to bring note to that the first 6 months of this position, a new individual that we have for the contract is building the foundations for grant writing supports for the community. The 3 grants and the amount of just over $1 million that have been applied for have only been for town grant applications. There has been additional support that's been provided to nonprofits in the community, as this grant writer is for town projects as well as for nonprofits, and that's not included in that number there. So yeah, we look forward to continuing to apply for additional grants in the remaining 6 months of the contract. And this staff report is to reapply for the same NDIT funding.
Thanks, Mr. George. Okay, I don't remember if the motion's on the table. Is it?
Yeah.
All right. Then all in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. 14.6 report from Ms. Allen with a recommendation to not proceed with sponsoring the request from Smithers Soccer. Councilor Ray.
I'll move the recommendation.
Is there a seconder? Councilor Beacom with seconds. Discussion? Councilor Patterson. Councilor Beacom, will you mind turning your mic on?
Sorry.
Okay, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I would just say I support staff's recommendation. But I have some sort of suggestions in our response, just to notify the group on the town's grant and aid program. Encourage them to seek out provincial grant opportunities and offer the support of our town grant writer. But lastly, I would like to see clarification if the province, specifically Ministry of Forest, is seeking to enter into an agreement with the province, or the relationship between the Ministry of Forest and the Smithers Soccer Group, just so that they understand in future, clarity on that relationship will help inform my consideration. I was just a bit confused by that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Patterson. Anyone else? I think my quick follow-up, just to the first part of what you said, yeah, having a nice response, and I think staff usually do a nice response, but just to make sure we're kind of including the extra information to their soccer. Okay, with that, all in favor? Any opposed? And that's carried. And 14.7, so we are at Alpine Village Estates and the Shipley Street water main looping, and I'll just acknowledge that we have residents of Alpine Village in our gallery this evening. So the recommendations is that we proceed with the looping project and ask that Alpine Village Estates maintain the water main located within their property. Mr. Allen, is there anything else that we need to consider?
I don't have anything further. Mayor Hunter, but open to any questions on behalf of Mr. Shipley.
Thank you, Council. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So question through to staff. I was just a bit confused. Just because when I was growing up, I had the pleasure of living in a strata. My mom sat on a board, and it was quite ruthless to hear about how they're run as far as like generating revenue. And my understanding is it's pretty inclusive. So I understand the recommendation is that we cost share 50-50, but my question was, is it because that obviously part of the area that we're talking about is actually town, quote unquote, property that we're obligated to maintain, or is it all strictly private property?
I'll go to Mr. Allen, but I think if I'm reading it right, Mr. Allen, you can kind of clarify the costs are ours. It's not actually a cost sharing project.
Yes, yeah, that's correct. The previous recommendation and motion was to cost share, but we've heard back from the strata a number of times, we being the town staff and council, that it's not in the strata does not have the capacity to take on the costs. The project is the actual looping would be located completely within the strata property, and that's shown on attachment 1, the map. So it is the dark blue dashed line, which is shown within the Alpine Village Estates property. So it would connect from the end of their water main up to the end of the Shipley Street water main, which is in a right of way that comes down to the border of the strata property. And then that water main, I guess the second recommendation by staff is that that water main be, it's an additional 35 meters added to the existing 287 meter water main. So I think in the letter from the strata, they requested that the town take on the maintenance of that, and because it is completely located within the strata property, staff are just recommending that be added to the maintenance for the strata itself.
Councillor Patterson.
Okay, so I just want to, I guess, be clear that I'm obviously not opposed to helping anyone in our community, especially when it comes to the human right of water. I guess I just get confused where there are strata structures in place in our community. Where do we draw the line of stratas then come to us and say, well, you paid for this individual strata? And obviously I have no idea how many stratas, pardon me, that we have in our community. But I'm just curious, like, is this a one-off or is this something that's common? I'm just trying to understand the relationship between stratas and the town. Thank you.
Mr. Allen, if you want to tell that, I see Mr. Wallace.
I'll start off, and we have a number of stratas in town. There's a new strata being completed at 40 unit strata. There's 10 fourplexes behind the school maintenance yard on Vancouver and First Street. It's very similar. There's a water main that is private, and it completely goes from one end of the strata to the other. So everything on that strata will be private. Whereas at the connections to the town water mains, that's where the town's responsibility lies. So I don't, yeah, there's not really, the main relationship is with the strata, bare land strata, is that everything is private once you're within the boundary of the strata.
Mr. Wallace.
Yes, Mayor Ashwell, I did ask some questions out of curiosity on this, since I saw that it didn't receive 2021. It seems that there is certainly some questions as to why this wasn't moved to the completion and development. So perhaps, and how things were finally signed off with that not being achieved. So it stands to reason then on the money side, why this proposal is moved from 50-50 to 100% town. But I certainly understand the requirement that the maintenance of what's there is not on town property, so it has to, that maintenance has to rest with the strata. And I mean, these things are difficult. This was developed a long time ago. There are many different people involved in how it came to end up how it is. Nobody's quite sure, but I think that's must have had something to do with the strata not wanting to move forward on a cost sharing basis. Thank you.
Mr. Allen.
Yeah, thank you. Just add one more point. Yeah, I just, and to fully answer Councillor Patterson's question, it in this case, it is more like a one-off because the strata was constructed first and then Shibley Street second. So the water main was not taken to the boundary of the strata during its construction, whereas when Shibley Street was constructed, water main was brought to the border of the strata, after the fact. So it was there was no real mechanism in place to create, I guess, for the town to enforce that connection. But just over time, with the quality concerns and then the fire flow issues as well at the fire hydrants, it's just come to a head where it's just the best thing to do for both parties in this case.
Councillor Beekman.
I'll move both staff recommendations.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Elliott, seconds. Councillor Ray, you got your mic on, did you want to speak? Okay, Councillor Beekman, then Councillor Ray.
Yeah, the reason why I was comfortable moving both recommendations is just the explanations made by Mr. Wallace and Mr. Allen. So both recommendations make perfect sense to me. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Beekman. Councillor Ray.
I'll be voting against this. There was a generous offer to pay for half. If Shibley Street had never been constructed, there would still be a loop. And there wouldn't be anything to connect to. And if people want to connect to further, anybody else wants to connect to a town service, they need to pay for it. And when I see from the letter that not only do we have to build it at the tax or the ratepayers' cost, we also have to put everything back the way it was. So it's actually going to be not just putting stuff in, we're going to have to fix the road in the private property. I'm not in favor of it. I'd be fine to do a 50-50 cost share. It's been offered twice and turned down. And I just, I think because I was involved in the initial discussions, I haven't heard anything that makes me change my mind. It should be a 50-50 cost share. And I'll leave it at that.
Thanks. No, thanks, Councillor Ray. Did I say hand on this side? Did you ever have it before, Councillor Elliott? Councillor Leonard. Councillor Leonard, go ahead.
Just question now, because of what Councilor Ray has said. And this is probably through to staff. I thought that when I was reading through, the submission, that, town staff is flushing the lines every year. Is that what's happening?
Mr. Allen?
Yeah, the town flushes, just the Shipley Street side annually, and then the Alpine Village Estates looks after its side within the strata property. So they flush their own water main.
So they're responsible for that.
And sorry, that maintenance is, that's all part of the maintenance that would carry on. Both Alpine Village Estates would still look after its side as well.
Just two questions, I think. I see the letter from Ms. Williams. And I see the recommendation from staff. And they don't tally. So the letter says, that if I'm reading it properly, that the maintenance be done by the town. And the staff report says that Alpine Village will do the maintenance. Has there been an agreement there, or is that the position that staff are recommending? But it's not agreed to by Alpine Village? So,
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, no, the staff have not gone back to Alpine Village Estates. That's the staff recommendation report. If that makes sense, and that will be taken back to the strata if council votes in favor this evening.
okay, thank you. And then project cost, forgive me if I missed something. I can hear your whisper, so $70,000. And does that include the surface works, the ground works, etc.?
Yes, Mayor Joe, that includes all the reinstatement to the existing condition.
And just remind me how good a Class C estimate is.
Class C is basically once you know quantities. And then you're able to take that to tender, and once you receive your tenders, then you're at Class A. So basically, this does include, I think, a 10 or 15% contingency in the 70,000.
Okay, so then just for my own understanding, this will just be direction to staff to go ahead and see if this is going to be agreeable with Alpine Village. To get the looping done, that's good for everyone. And I heard one off, and I certainly heard Councilor Ray's concern, but okay. Anyone else? Councilor Patterson, and then Councilor Elliott.
Sorry, thank you, Worship. So I just want to say I feel quite guilty in sort of suggesting that I don't recognize that this type of service is a basic human right. But what I feel like the reason why I'm going to vote against it is because stratas are just that, and I recognize that you pay a fee for unfortunate things that do come up that cost a significant amount of money. But I just think about it's such a slippery slope that if we do this for one strata, what's to say that other stratas aren't going to come to us and say, well, we've done this for others, what about us? And at the end of the day, I recognize we're limited in our funding resources. We either get provincial funding through grant and aids through the province, or we raise taxation. So I recognize it's only $70,000, but I also find it very hard to believe that when I look at the scope of the project, it's going to be completed with that amount of money. So I hate to say that I'm going to vote against it, but unfortunately, that's where I'm going to.
Okay, thanks, Councilor Patterson. Councilor Elliott.
Okay, I see on here it says you've had to use a blow off to flush the water main in the Shipley, and it adds additional workload. How much additional workload would that be?
Mr. Allen.
Would it be mutually beneficial for us to do it and just cover the cost and then it'll pay for itself in a while?
Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Councilor Elliott, through Mayor Atchell. Yeah, that would be a hard estimate of the return on investment of removing the blow off with the water main looping. It's not a large extra cost. I think it may add up to a total of 6 or 8 hours extra for staff to use a blow off as opposed to just opening closing a couple valves and opening a fire hydrant to do the standard flushing program. But it will, over time, eliminate that need, that's all. There's additional maintenance of a blow-off valve that's, that I would say that's included in that 6 or 8 hours additional as well, whereas you don't have that with the standard fire hydrant.
So we could do the same thing with a blow off if we didn't extend pipe.
Sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
As in flushing the water main, we could still do that with the blow off sufficiently without connecting the water mains.
Yes, that would be just on the Shipley Street side. The Alpine Village Estates has their own means to flush their water main. But by completing the looping, it would actually be, equally easier for both parties to do the flushing programs.
Okay, anything further? So the motion on the floor, both recommendations, funded. That we proceed, that we pay for it, and Alpine Village, be required to maintain it. I hear you, Councillor Ray, sometimes I don't like things either, but in this case, I think, it's better to land on the side of just getting it done as we're swallowing, the fact that we're going to bear this cost for the community. I think there's more advantage than disadvantage. I hear Councillor Patterson's caution as well, and I think, we've had to make decisions before where we make a decision on case A and we might make a different decision on case B. If it isn't acceptable to Alpine Village, then staff will be back. So if they're not willing to do the maintenance, then staff will be back. And I think, we're seeing a cost here, and if it's exceptionally different than that, I would anticipate that's back for us as well, Mr. Allen. The $70,000 just do it. Okay, so if there's any final comments, let's have them, otherwise I'll call the vote. All in favor? And opposed? So the motion passes with Councillor Ray, Councillor Patterson, and Councillor Elliott opposed. Okay, thanks, folks. And we're up to 14.8, and this is the report from Mr. Lawrence regarding the tractors, and we have Mr. Blackburn here. I'm not sure, somewhere here in case there's questions. We'll cast them in one direction or another. So we have the recommendation on the tractors. Council, questions, comments? Councillor Ray.
I'm gonna move the motion, or the recommendation. And I'll speak to it if I get a seconder.
Okay, you're moving the entire recommendation. And I think I heard Councillor Patterson say you're seconding. Okay, it's on the floor, Councillor Ray.
Yeah, just going through our tour that we had of the works and ops and seeing how much work has gone into maintaining the tractors that we have and how much we ask those tractors to do. I think if we don't take advantage of the opportunity to buy them now, we're going to end up with reduced services, because it seems to me that much to the credit of the Works and Ops department, that we've used these tractors well beyond what we could have expected when we bought them. They've done an excellent job of making sure that they're working, that they clear our sidewalks. And we've seen when one's been down, how much of a difference it makes. And I would hate for both of them to go down. And the thing I like about these tractors is that we can still have parts used from old ones and from the remaining older version that we're gonna keep. So I think this is a good way to go.
Thanks, Councillor Ray. Other council? I'm gonna ask the question then, and I'm not sure if I can ask, I'm gonna cast my eyes to Mr. Blackburn, because he's nodding his head. I do see the comment under environmental considerations, so I'm just going to ask if the investigation is done in terms of moving us on the path towards zero emission.
Thank you, Mayor Astro, through to council. I wasn't involved in the initial. I know that I have done a bunch of this research for the airport. Although these things show up on the internet as available and readily available, when you actually, the ones that I've researched, I can say that when you dive into them and start to get there, they're not readily available to us here. Maybe it's getting better and better as we go, but when we've done some of the ones at the airport, they're actually not available for what we do in the service we ask them to do. So I really appreciate Councillor Ray's comments about how hard we work these things, the service that we ask them to do, and they're very specialized machines that, you know, fit the sidewalks, they fit all our little trails. Yes, there are options out there. One of the things I noticed as I was cruising through the internet just while we listened to your presentations, was that they're only good to -20, some of the electric ones. So we ask these things to perform at +40 to -40 all day long, every day. They're air conditioned, they're heated, it's comfortable for the staff. There's so many things to take into consideration other than just the zero, but yes, we do research all of those things and try to bring forward the best product that we think is needed.
Thanks, Mr. Blackburn. Maybe just by way of follow-up, and it's coming to you, but I realize this isn't your report, is perhaps, I guess just generally to staff and to Mr. Schroeder, this piece under the environmental considerations, perhaps that needs just a little bit more expanse from time to time, so that we actually understand what the research has been, because we have given a direction, a general direction. And so perhaps a bit more information on this part when possible, so that we actually know what considered. I see Mr. Walsh, hang on. So just so that we can actually put that in some sort of a perspective, so that we understand what's been. Mr. Walsh.
Yes, Mayor Atchell. So as part of updating the equipment and fleet plans, council may recall at Finance Committee that this year we integrated climate related targets in there. So these two pieces of equipment, they have 15-year lifespans and they're due to be finished 24 and 25, and that's exactly where we are. They'll perform according to our plan well until 2039. And at 2039, Canada is currently looking for everyone to be buying at 2040, 100% of medium to heavy duty purchases should be zero emission. So I mean, we have thought about this and how it fits. And the staff practice at this point is, hey, if there's an obvious winner, electric, hydrogen, whatever available, and it for sure will fulfill service needs and can be maintained and so on here, that's the first choice. And if that's not the case, which is the situation here, the fallback is, okay, well, how long will this last? Will we be able to convert in time? And so we have done some work, and yes, I'm sorry, it's not referred to in the report.
Thanks, Mr. Wallace. I'm forgetting people's names. Better. Okay. The motion's on the floor. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that's carried. Alrighty. We are at the 15th, so we have some reports there from Smithers Fire Rescue and BVESS. Any comments or questions for staff? Councilor Patterson.
Just a comment, just to say that how proud I am to see how our ESS services have helped out other communities. Like I look at the level 1 calls responding to people outside of the area, Chalkwa. I look at the deployments, Witset. Yeah, so I just want to say that, yeah, very proud.
Thanks, Councilor Patterson. Mr. Schroeder has let me know that the staff were intending to speak to those. I'm sorry, I didn't understand that from the agenda, so I'll look to staff if you want to add or guide us through these.
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
I would, I think we're gonna pull them up here, and just quickly go through them. From the fire side, Matt will go through the Buckley ESS side, but the wildfire side, I'll just speak to quickly. I know you guys have had a long evening, so I will be considerate of your time as well. But really appreciate you guys taking the time here.
1 minute. Take it away.
All right, thank you. So, yeah, just, you can go into the second slide here, but most of the photos here are actually from this fire season, including the previous one, which was up in the Spetsizi. This one down here is down in Kamloops, but we had, as everyone knows, and I'm not going to belabor the point, but we had a very busy 2023 throughout the whole province, not just Smithers Fire Rescue. But yeah, for us, the dry conditions, lightning strikes, and inadvertent or careless human acts resulted in a busy fire season, putting the town of Smithers, surrounding forests, and the urban interface intermix at risk. And again, I know a lot of people speak in the same vernacular around wildfire, but the next slide just demonstrates a couple of terms that might not be familiar to everyone. So I was just it's a little darker on here, but just the difference between the intermix and the interface. On the left there, the intermix is an example, and we have a lot of rural areas where it's acreages with houses essentially in the forest or among the trees. Whereas when we speak interface, it's more, and we have these at some of the edges of town as well, but where it's a more, there's a direct line between the forest and the neighborhood. So when we're speaking those terms, I just wanted to demonstrate what they were to hopefully clarify a few things. But just going into our 2023 season, our capacity here within the fire department, we have one wildland specific fire apparatus. We're building to a second full structure protection unit, which council approved through grant funding. So by 2026, it's a 4-year plan, and we're doing the second purchase in 2024 for that, which is 100% funded. We have a water tender, the new chief's truck that was purchased in 2023, along with a WITSYNC grant in 2023 as well, will be equipped during high wildfire rating times with escape unit that gives us some increased capacity along with our wildland apparatus. We have a side-by-side, and then our reserve engine often gets some wildland equipment as well, so it can work in a support role should there be. The capacity as our firefighters, we have one structure protection specialist. And these people work towards managing large scale events where many structures are threatened. Then we have as well 3 task force leaders in our group that they work towards managing groups of apparatus that are actually fighting fires. 8 engine bosses, which they're the people in charge of the individual apparatus, and then all of our firefighters are also trained in wildland and structure protection so that they can utilize the equipment we have. We did have some close to home events this year, which we're very lucky and happy to report that we did not have any structure loss in our response area. So both the Powers Creek fire, and we had an fairly large event on Elgin Ave as well, which luckily everyone came home safely from the residents and the firefighters there as well, and everyone had homes to go back to. We had 18 wildland responses in the last year. One was mutual aid with Telqua. And there's varying sizes when we arrived, but there was obviously potential to expand. And again, I noted the structures or the structures lost there, but I already spoke about that, so we can move on. And then we also did a lot of work around the province. We even packed up some of our gear and flew up to Spetsiesi to assist some traditional Indigenous encampments, as well as a mining camp that was being threatened by wildfire. And then the upper right picture is the events in Whitsett, where we were lucky enough to be able to assist that community as well when they were threatened. Again, I'm not going to go through the whole list, but we had people deployed this year for a total of 3,419 hours on fires around the province. So there's kind of the total lists of all the deployments we did, but we'll move on there. Some of the things, some of the reasons for deployments, obviously helping neighbors to assist some of our other agencies, whether it's fire departments, BC Wildfire. Yeah, ideally, we want to decrease loss of life and loss of property. And so that's our big goal. Another big thing is to learn from others and to gain experience. So working with people that have more experience than us, and we're getting to a point where often we're looked to on deployments as the people with the experience, so we can help our people. And then the last thing is a bit self-serving as well for us as a community. Kind of the numbers aren't 100% in yet, but we made about just over $250,000 in after expenses for the community for our reserves. There we go. I was spacing on the word. Some of the training we'll be doing going forward here for 2024. We'll be sending a person down to carry on with their structure protection specialist training. There's a wildfire resiliency conference that's in Prince George. We'll be sending a few people to that, which is again through our Fire Smart granting, so it doesn't actually cost our community anything, but we're able to send some of our firefighters down to get additional training. We have for our recruits and some of our current firefighters structure protection training in Houston. We're hoping to do a few more courses as well. I think actually our training officer does have the wildland firefighter training on the schedule already, but I unfortunately missed updating those dates on this. And I just wanted to say thanks to a lot of organizations, and I first of all go out to any, or my apologies go out to any organizations I missed, but we did a lot of work last summer with BC Wildfire, with Telqua Fire Rescue, with Houston Fire Department. Whitsett's Fire Department was instrumental in working with them when we were out there. The Wet'suwet'en Community Forest has been really great to us, both in working in their forest, which was the Powers Creek wildfire, but as well they've been generous in some grant allocations to us. Town of Smithers, a lot of the other staff, they juggle stuff in the summers to help us with getting some equipment out the door and stuff like that, which is greatly appreciated. Buckley ESS has been a great organization that works with us and gives backs us up with a lot of the resources they have internally as well. And then lastly, our volunteers, obviously our people do get paid when they're on deployment through the province, so which is really nice, but still when we have people out of town, it also means the volunteers that are in town still not getting paid. Pick up the slack, so just thanking our volunteers for their time and the commitment to our organization. And as well, their families for allowing them to come and be volunteers. We have a lot of people that leave at awkward times to go to events to help our community, and it's greatly appreciated for all the families. And the other big one I just wanted to throw a shout out to is we have so many employers in our community that allow our volunteers to leave while they're at work to help the rest of the community. So I want to say thank yous to the employers that employ our firefighters as well. So yeah, that's the end of my that's the end of it. Thanks for giving me the time.
Thank you for the presentation. Is there any comments or questions from council? Okay, I'll just echo the thank you. You put them there for everyone, so you all have our gratitude as well. And next up.
I'll load it up. Go ahead.
My slides.
We give Mr. George a lot of assignments, so we need to be patient. We have to do all these things.
Thank you, Mr. George. Thank you, Mayor, no, for allowing us to have a moment of your time to speak to the annual report for emergency support services. I've asked our Deputy Director, Audrey McKinnon, to come and join me, as I'd be lying if I said this is 50-50. She does a great deal of work to have us where we are. Yeah, so again, this is our 2023 annual report, just about our response to our community this year. Let's go to the next slide. So at this time, we have 31 volunteers, which is about where we hover over the last 5 years. We've been sitting around 30 volunteers, and we now have 4 junior members. So we're training this year. Audrey McKinnon is our Deputy Director. McKinnon is our training officer. She manages all of our training. We conducted 44 training events this year to a total of 1,157.5 hours. We did an ESS, we provided a regional ESS boot camp with instructors from the Justice Institute that we brought to Smithers. We also had a public service lifelong volunteer leadership course, which is the first one hosted in the North and as long as I could find. That was up here in Smithers, and we had people from we had volunteers from across the province join us for that. We also sent 10 volunteers to the NEST conference in Prince George, and ESS already began operational debrief that happens in Brights Lake once a year. We participated in that. Community events, we started upping our community events. We did 8 community events this year with a total of 220.5 hours. We do the trade show, fall fair, Santa's breakfast. We started doing school talks about emergency preparedness. We had the fall fair parade. We did the very first time doing a float, and we did a Remembrance Day ceremony, and our treat city with the fire, which is led by the fire department. They let us participate. So our level 1 calls, this is where we respond to structure fires in the community, apartment fires, home fires, small floods, things of that nature. We had 6 calls for Smithers, 3 for Telkwa, 7 for the electoral area, which is a total of 16 hours, which brought us to 197.5 hours of response to emergencies with the fire service. Our deployments take up obviously very much majority of our time. We deployed this year for the electoral area A of the regional district. We sent volunteers to Houston and equipment. We sent volunteers and equipment to Vanderhook to support them for their fires. We sent volunteers to Whitsett, and then we also remotely provided support to Kamloops and Kelowna. So the electoral area A fires took up 56% of our deployment time. Vanderhook was 4%, Houston took up 16% of our time, Kelowna and Kamloops was done remotely. We were doing registering and providing services to evacuees from that area. It was 21% of it was a great deal of our time, to a total of 981 hours.
To speak just quickly to the deployments, we were running reception centers in Vanderhoof, and then we pulled our equipment back. And when our fires here kicked off, and we were running the Houston Reception Center and the Smithers Reception Center at the same time. So we had volunteers deployed to both communities running simultaneously, and some of our volunteers were doing 20-hour shifts to try to support everybody in Littoral G and Littoral area. We deployed for assets and mobile response unit, town of Smithers car, the one-ton truck, laptops, printers, and we deployed lighting. So in our grand total of time, level 1 calls take up 5% of our time, deployments take up 39% of our time, training is 47%, and community makes 39%. We also needed to, at some point, call for help. So we had Sanix deploy, Mission deployed volunteers, Kamloops deployed volunteers, and volunteers from Terrace in the area around Terrace deployed to support us. And they traveled from Smithers, slowly trickled down to Prince George to support all the communities along the way. We opened up a reception center, which ended up being a hub for our response in our community, acted as a coordination center for response, hosted regular pre-op or bridge coordination meetings. For response staff, worked with the pre-op advanced planning unit for group lodging in Smithers. Smithers was going to be a hub for the group lodging. If we just had no hotels. Prince George was full. Smithers, there was a possibility that Smithers is where everyone was going to be sent that was evacuated and be housed on cots and stuff to the Christian school. So we worked with our advanced planning unit. We hosted the coordination meetings and response coordination with BC Emergency Health Services, the RCMP, Northern Health, Smithers Fire, Telpa Fire, Search and Rescue was all kind of run out of that reception center also. We were successful again in the 2023 ESS grant for $60,000 with Telpa, which provided us with a great deal of equipment to increase our capacity. Some of those things included a 20-foot trailer so we could store and move our mobile reception center, which is the only one in the province. We got license plates for volunteer recognition and appreciation, which was probably the most successful thing we've ever done. They really mattered to people. We got some new bags and some more uniform components for our responders. We are the first team in the province that I can find that has a dedicated junior team. Right now we have 4 juniors. They must be 16 years of age to join. And they were instrumental in the success of our deployments. Those teenagers worked their tails off. They responded to real emergencies, real house fires, and then they were a big part of our Houston response. So they were fabulous. Regional training at the NEST conference, which is an ESS provincial ESS conference. Bulkley ESS provided 2 courses at that conference. One was mobile ESS operations, where we took our mobile response center, or mobile reception center, we set it up in a gymnasium. And then Deputy Director McKinnon provided a electronic registration assistance course to try to get all the other volunteers in the area up to speed. And it was hosted inside the mobile reception center, which was awesome. So other more noteworthy events, we had our trailer broken into and about $600 worth of equipment stolen. Luckily, we did receive grant funding through Seabridge Gold. Yes, there we go. Which covered the cost of that stolen assets. We did a news article done about our mobile reception center that was set up in Prince George. We are now, Bulkley is now participating in the situation table. We had a large hand in the new ESS program guide. Site visit from provincial EMCR staff, ERA specialist and deployment coordinator, and the we got our provincial certificate of recognition for the Bulkley ESS response to the 2023 wildfires. So some of our challenges and future upcoming needs, our volunteers right now are using their personal vehicles to respond to emergency calls. They're being contaminated with carcinogens, products of combustion which are cancer causing, which is a big issue. Even we try to have our volunteers stage their vehicles farther back, wind changes, smoke changes. We've had 2 of our volunteers get their vehicles smoked out. Each one of those deep cleans costs $400 and it can take up to 4 days to get their vehicle back from the detailer. The bulk is unable to part of other issues, we're unable to transport our equipment with that one of the chief trucks. The fire department has been extremely gracious to allow us to use their trucks to move our equipment. However, as we found with the fires we had very locally, those trucks had to go to do fire response, which is what they're for, and we were unable to, we had to get volunteers to transport equipment back and forth, and it took an hour before we were able to, like, it took a while for us to get our doors open, just because of the transport time. Rental vehicles are very scarce during the summer fire season. We were very lucky that we found one locally in the middle of our very heavy response, which helped a lot. So bulk this is needed response apparatus that can be used to transport, to respond to calls and move assets to and from reception centers and plumbing locations. The other reason so we're looking at an ambulance. The reason for that is that we can do level 1 calls in the back of the ambulance in the winter, in the hot summer. We can get people away from watching their homes, being involved in whatever emergency it is, and we can also be able to transport people to hotels. Right now, we now have a taxi service, which is great, but for the last 3 years, we've been using the RCMP to transport people affected by fire in the back of the cruiser to a hotel, which wasn't great at the time. So a dedicated vehicle mitigates what has become a safety hazard with the increased intensity of calls that we respond to. So it's something that we're starting to research on how to acquire an asset like this. And that is all we have. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the presentation and your work. Council, questions or comments? Councilor Reagan.
I'm just gonna make comments about both the presentations because they're both amazing. But one thing I really appreciated that ESS is doing is with their junior program. I think sometimes teenagers get a bit of a bad rap that they aren't community minded or they're not going out and about. And I've seen those teenagers at various events, and I have to say is their dedication is fantastic and it makes my heart sing. I love that we're getting youth involved, especially as it gives them the skills or the opportunity to learn new skills and leadership. So I love the junior program. Also wanted to just say thank you again to all the volunteers. And I really appreciate how it was highlighted that, you know, their families are involved too. I know that the level of training has changed significantly through legislation over the last little bit, which of course has added to a lot of nights away from home. And I just remember from when my husband was on the radio and volunteer fire department, it never ceased to amaze me that his radio would always go off most inopportune times. I joked we never actually got to attend a wedding together because every single time there was a ceremony, his radio would go off and he would have to go. So just thank you to all the volunteers and their families for their dedication and commitment to the community and the outlying communities.
Thanks, Councilor Raven. Anyone else? Okay, once again, I will just echo the thank you for the work. I think, you know, this sort of work is the type that we don't notice until we need it. And hope I never need it. I think that's really it. I did have a moment to check in at the reception center last summer. It seems like a long time ago. So yeah, I do remember the number there and the crisis situation in Swanton Valley at that time. So it's nice to know people came and helped us. I didn't know that. So seeing the incoming reception as well. Sometimes you forget that people are working around to help with them as well. So thanks for the presentations and genuinely thank you for the work that you all do. Those who work with you, the volunteers, to add to our community. Thanks, folks. Alrighty, council, 15.3 municipal markers. Any questions or comments, Councilor Patterson?
Thank you, your worship. Quick question through to staff on page 116. Assuming the number of calls for the garbage recycle for the month of December being the highest, upwards of almost 50. Assuming that's just due to the holiday season and not because we have a piece of equipment that was down, if anyone knows or can comment.
It might be that nobody knows that right now. Councilor Ray, Councilor Ray.
I can't answer officially, but I do recall that there was one day where one of the apparatus was unavailable. And basically the only people that knew seem to be the people that they call the town, which isn't a bad thing. It's just that, maybe we need to include some information that if you miss it, we're gonna get to it as soon as we can. Because they came quite early the next day, and I think that kicked in a few calls as well.
So
Thanks, Councilor.
So it wasn't because we didn't have the.
Councilor Patterson, can you just turn your mic on?
Sorry, your worship, so it was broken down, so my question, because I can't recall what we talked about last. But was a new garbage truck on our docket for this fiscal year?
Mr. Wallace on
Mayor,
garbage trucks.
actual since 2021. There have been stops and starts because there have been changes in the needs and therefore the specifications for a new truck. And the latest I heard this morning was that there is some arrangement developing to get a unit here on a rental basis to discover whether it will possibly be the right kind of unit to acquire.
Thanks, Mr. Wallace. So I imagine we'll get some more information as we go. Councilor Ray.
Yeah, just so I make it clear that the staff works very hard, to get the unit back in service, but once it's back in service, they start very early in the morning to get caught back up. So it's a lot of work from our staff. And sometimes I don't think maybe it's appreciated how much an equipment breakdown can throw things behind, but it's very quickly caught up on all times. So kudos to the staff for that.
Thanks, Councilor Ray. And I think your earlier comment speaks to our bated breath wait for the communications person that we're hoping to get. Okay, any other questions to municipal markers? Okay, 17.1, letter from the city of Terrace regarding a regional housing forum or regional housing conference. If anyone is able to attend this, I am not, otherwise I would go, but I will be somewhere else attending a different conference at that point. So we just want to sort of look at their schedules and perhaps look at, I pulled up what I could for other information. There'll be more coming as it gets closer, but we know that this is an issue and it'd be interesting to actually hear the, the kind of situation discussion that's in our region, but I'll leave it there. Okay, I actually, just for information, there's also a UBCM housing conference coming up really quick. I'm trying to fit that into my schedule. It's in response to all the legislative changes. So I've gone through it. You'll see it in the UBCM, sort of the latest UBCM news, the compass. You can find it there. Not sure if you will get that, but that's where it's coming through. Councilor Ryan.
I was just wondering through the mayor, are we considering sending our CAO or somebody to the UBCM conference?
It's really new. It was sort of emergency is maybe too dramatic a word for this, but I think UBCM is reacting to the changes on behalf of its members. So it was fairly thin information that came out late last week. And I haven't discussed it with staff at all. So I think anything's on the table. It's good to participate. I think either through the CAO or Mr. Allen's department, that's where the impacts are gonna lie, and to council. So if anyone's interested, take a look at it. And if there are staff that are interested in, there's support needed from council, I think I'd be willing to consider that. So it's not much of an answer, but it just came out. Councilor Ray.
Yeah, just whether, this is something that's new and it is kind of probably going to be needed for some of the departments, and just council's role there is maybe perhaps we need to bring additional resources beyond the travel budgets that are already probably covered from professional development and UBCM, et cetera.
Thanks, Councilor Ray. Just to that, generally, we had discussed last year when Ms. Plouffe was still here, the notion that some of these conferences really do require staff support. And so at UBCM, which is staff support, and I can't quite remember all the others, but it is really apparent at some of the bigger conferences that the right staff are there as well, so the mayor and council are there, doing kind of that role, and staff hear the things differently, particularly in this case where we're hearing about legislation, impacts of legislation. Elected officials care deeply because we're gonna be tasked with what do we do next? And staff care deeply because they're gonna be tasked with like figuring it out and making recommendations to us on how we move forward, so. So I think it's just wide open, I can find it and share it with, council and Mr. Schroeder for sharing to staff as well. Okay, and then the 18th, is there anything under there that people want to discuss? Councilor Patterson, sorry.
It's okay, 18-4, please, your worship.
Anything else? I'm just gonna look, I looked at 18-1 and the only thing that occurred to me, and it's really that from a resident or local government perspective, a longer operating line has some advantages to community. It keeps people, you know, the infrastructure's built, like 21 years is better than 18 years, but that's not based on anything, and I haven't delved into it yet. I started to go down that rabbit hole today, but generally supporting higher production and a shorter mine life seems a little bit counterintuitive to me, but that was just a gut reaction, but you're all invited to take a look at it. It's got a comment ability. Okay, Councilor Patterson.
Thank you, your worship. So I'm certain this is a question through to staff, but I'm gonna read up the so page 1 from Deputy Premier and Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General Mike Farnworth. In the second to last sentence, it says, should the RCMP advance any business cases to increase resources at the Smithers Provincial Unit to the ministry in accordance with the terms of Provincial Policy Service Agreement, I can assure you it will be carefully considered by the ministry. So my question is, will the town be preparing something with the local detachment to further our request for 24-hour policing services? Thank you.
Councilor Patterson, I think the follow-up to that would be a conversation with the RCMP and staffing being closed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else, Councilor?
Just to clarify, we weren't actually asking for, when we were asking for 24/7 policing services.
Oh.
We were asking for additional support on the provincial side, given that we had contributed 2 extra members on the town side.
Okay. Anything else? 19's done. Think we're at the last item. All right, thanks, Councilor Raven. I'll call for a motion to adjourn. Councilor Buchanan. Councilor Leonard, thank you. Somebody second. All right, all in favor? Any opposed? Thanks, everyone, for adjourned.